Ever feel like you're just sleepwalking through life? Going through the motions, but not really living with intention. That's kind of what I was thinking about when I was reading Surah Al-Muddathir. It's this chapter in the Quran, and it's like a giant alarm clock.
Yeah.
Like shaking us awake.
Yeah.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into this surah.
Oh, okay.
It's full of really vivid imagery.
Right.
Like a mysterious figure wrapped in these robes, and a fiery place called Sakar. And it asks these like seriously tough questions about how we're living our lives. And to help us unpack all of this, we have our expert guide to the text.
Hi.
So what's really fascinating about this surah is it doesn't pull any punches. It lays out the consequences of our choices.
Yeah.
In a pretty stark way.
It does.
But it also offers this message of hope.
Absolutely.
And the possibility of redemption. So are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely, yeah. This surah, it was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, and it's a powerful call to action.
Okay.
And it's amazing how much it manages to say in just 56 verses.
56 verses. Wow. Okay. So let's jump right into those opening verses.
Okay.
Verses 1-7. It starts with, O you enrobed one, arise and warn, and magnify your Lord. It feels incredibly urgent, like a divine command that cannot be ignored.
Yes, and understanding the context of the revelation is really crucial. This was early on in the prophet's mission.
Yeah.
And these verses are a direct instruction from God, urging him to rise and spread the message of Islam.
I'm really struck by the image of the enrobed one.
Yeah.
It's mysterious, but also kind of captivating. And then there's this instruction to purify your clothes and abandon abominations. What do you think is the deeper meaning behind that, especially for like someone like me trying to figure out how to live a more meaningful life?
It's a beautiful metaphor for inner purification.
Okay.
For constantly working on ourselves to become better versions of ourselves. It goes beyond just physical cleanliness. It's about cleansing our hearts and minds from negativity, you know, those harmful thoughts and actions that go against what God teaches us.
So it's not just about outward actions, but about aligning our inner world with what we're putting out into the world.
Right.
Like making sure my intentions are pure.
Yeah.
Even in like the smallest decision.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It's about making a conscious effort to live with integrity, both internally and externally.
Okay.
And the verses that follow about not expecting any reward for your good deeds and being steadfast in your devotion to God, it reinforces this idea of selfless service.
Yeah.
And genuine commitment to something bigger than ourselves.
That makes me think about how often, like, I get caught up in wanting recognition for doing good things.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder to check my intentions and just focus on doing good for its own sake.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a constant process, a journey of self-reflection and growth.
Okay, but then the surah takes this dramatic turn, right?
Yeah.
Verses 8-10 introduce this idea of the day of judgment, and it's described as a day that will be difficult and not easy for those who disbelieve. And we also get this powerful image of a trumpet being blown, signaling the end of times. Pretty intense stuff, even for someone who isn't like particularly religious.
Right. And the Day of Judgment is this core concept in Islam. It's a day of reckoning where everyone is held accountable for their actions in this life. And the surah is very clear. For those who reject faith and live against God's will, this day will be incredibly challenging.
So it's not just an abstract concept.
Yeah.
It's like a stark warning that our actions have real consequences. Consequences that go way beyond our life here on earth.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most captivating sections of the surah, the story of the wealthy man.
Okay.
Verses 11-26. This is where the story gets really personal.
Yeah.
Zeroing in on those individual choices we make.
I found this story really thought-provoking. You have this man who seemingly has everything. Wealth, children, a comfortable life.
Right.
But he's still resistant to God's message. Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. And it's something that's relevant to all of us, regardless of our background. The surah emphasizes his tendency to question and overanalyze.
Okay.
He has every opportunity to reflect and grasp the truth, but he ultimately makes the choice to reject it.
And it's interesting how the surah keeps repeating the phrase, may he perish, how he analyzed. It feels almost like a refrain, hammering home a point.
Yeah.
What do you think the surah is trying to tell us by focusing on his analysis?
I think it's highlighting the danger of relying solely on intellect and reason without acknowledging a higher power. This man embodies the mindset of those who think they can figure everything out on their own, rejecting anything that falls outside their limited understanding. It's a warning against intellectual arrogance, reminding us that true wisdom involves submitting to something greater than ourselves.
So it's not about rejecting intellect altogether. It's
Yeah.
more about recognizing its limitations and being open to the possibility that there might be truths that are beyond our comprehension. It's like saying our minds are powerful tools,
Yeah.
but they're not the be-all and end-all.
You've got it. It's a call for humility, for acknowledging that we don't have all the answers. And the surah doesn't shy away from describing what can happen when we choose to ignore that call.
You're talking about sucker, right?
Yeah.
This fiery abyss that the surah describes in pretty vivid detail. It's a place of intense suffering,
Right.
a place that neither leaves nor spares.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's a little unsettling to read about, even if it is metaphorical.
It's meant to be unsettling.
Right.
The imagery is meant to evoke this visceral reaction, to make the consequences of rejecting God's message feel real, tangible. It's a way of conveying the gravity of the situation.
And there's this one detail that always gets to me. Sakar is guarded by 19 angels. What's the significance of that number? 19?
Yeah.
Is there something I'm missing here?
There are actually many different interpretations of this. Some scholars believe it points to the complex, multi-layered nature of hell, while others see it as a symbol of divine power, even in the realm of punishment. The exact meaning is open to interpretation, but it definitely adds another layer of intrigue to the surah.
I love that the surah leaves us with these open questions, these mysteries to ponder. It encourages us to really engage with the text on a deeper level and draw our own conclusions.
That's a great point. It reminds us that even within a divine revelation, there's room for individual reflection and interpretation. We're invited to grapple with these ideas and find meaning in them for ourselves.
So far, we've got this powerful opening, a warning about the day of judgment, and this cautionary tale about intellectual arrogance.
Yeah.
Where does the surah go from there?
From there, the surah shifts its focus to the natural world as evidence of God's power. We'll explore that in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. I'm curious to see how the surah connects the dots between the warnings and the beauty of creation. So right before we left off, we were talking about how the surah shifts gears and starts focusing on the natural world.
Yeah.
What's the connection here? How does the beauty of creation fit in with all these warnings about judgment and consequences?
Yeah, that's a really insightful question, and it gets to the heart of what the surah is trying to tell us. Verses 32 through 37 talk about the night, the morning, the vastness of creation,
Okay.
all pointing towards this divine design, a higher intelligence behind it all.
This is like the surah saying, hey, look around you. The evidence of God is everywhere, even in the things you might take for granted.
Exactly. These verses connect to the concept of signs in the Quran. Think of it like this. The natural world with all its wonders and complexities, it's like this giant billboard pointing towards the existence of a creator. It's urging us to reflect and contemplate on the bigger picture.
That's such a cool way to think about it. The universe is a signpost pointing towards something beyond ourselves. It makes me want to go outside and just stare at the stars for a while. But, okay, let's be real. Sometimes when I'm stressed or going through a tough time, it's hard to appreciate the beauty of creation. It all just feels kind of overwhelming.
I think we all struggle with that at times, but that's why these reminders are so important. The surah isn't just about fear and punishment, it's also about cultivating awe and wonder.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the divine presence in every aspect of our lives, from the grand cosmic scale to the everyday miracles we often miss.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So the surah is guiding us to connect the dots between the warnings, the consequences, and the evidence of a creator that's all around us. It's like a wake-up call to start paying attention, to see the world with fresh eyes.
You're picking up on something really important here, this idea of awareness. The surah wants us to be present, to see the interconnectedness of everything. And that brings us to what I think is the central message of the surah: individual responsibility and choice.
Okay, let's unpack that. Verses 38 through 47 seem to lay it out pretty clearly. Every soul is hostage to what it has earned. Basically, our choices, our actions, they determine our ultimate fate. There's no escaping that.
You're absolutely right. We're each responsible for the choices we make and the path we forge for ourselves. But the surah also introduces this idea of those on the right who will dwell in gardens and even inquire about the fate of those who didn't make it.
It's interesting, it's not just about individual salvation, but also about compassion and a sense of justice. Even in paradise, those who are saved are still concerned about the well-being of others.
That's a profound observation. It speaks to the interconnectedness of humanity even in the afterlife, and it highlights the contrast between those who heed God's message and those who reject it.
And the Surah actually gives us a glimpse into that contrast through the dialogue between the inhabitants of paradise and those who are condemned to Sakar.
Yes, and it's a powerful reminder that our actions have ripple effects. Those in paradise are filled with compassion even as they question the choices that led others to their fate.
What really struck me is how those condemned to Sakar respond. They list off all the things they didn't do. They didn't pray. They didn't feed the destitute. They indulged in worldly pleasures, and they denied the day of judgment. It's almost like a confession, a realization of their missed opportunities.
It is a confession of regret, isn't it? A painful recognition of the path they could have taken but chose not to. And the surah doesn't let us off the hook. It drives home the point that these choices have real lasting consequences.
Verses 48 through 53 are really powerful in that sense. It talks about turning away from the reminder, using this image of panicked donkeys fleeing from a lion. That's a pretty harsh comparison. What's the surah trying to convey here?
It's highlighting the futility of trying to outrun the truth. The reminder in this context is the message of God, the call to live a righteous life. Those who reject it are like those donkeys running blindly driven by fear, but ultimately unable to escape their fate.
So it's not just about ignorance, it's about a deliberate avoidance of the truth, right? They choose to run even though deep down they know they can't hide forever.
Exactly. They might try to distract themselves with worldly pleasures or intellectual gymnastics, but the truth has a way of catching up with us eventually. And there's this poignant detail in verse 52. Even in their denial, they still long for knowledge, for understanding. They desire to be given scrolls unrolled, even though they spent their lives running from the very knowledge contained within those scrolls.
It's like they're trapped in this internal struggle, torn between the desire to know and the fear of what that knowledge might reveal about themselves and the choices they've made.
That's a brilliant insight. And it speaks to the complexity of human nature, our capacity for both seeking truth and resisting it. We're constantly negotiating this tension between what we know and what we choose to believe.
So where do we go from here? If we're constantly battling these internal conflicts, if we're tempted to run from the truth, what's the surah's ultimate message? What's the takeaway for someone like me trying to navigate all of this?
That's a question we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Oh, okay.
Stay tuned.
So before we left off, we were talking about how Surah Al-Muddathir highlights this human struggle between wanting to have the truth and avoiding it,
Yeah.
Something we can probably all relate to, even if we don't want to admit it. So if we're constantly kind of battling these internal conflicts, tempted to just run from the truth, what is the surah's ultimate message? What's the takeaway for someone like me trying to navigate all this?
I think this surah reminds us that, despite all our struggles, we have the power to choose. It's like a call to, awaken,
Right.
to remember what really matters and to choose wisely.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
But how do we actually do that? How do we make those wise choices when we're constantly bombarded with distractions and temptations?
Well, verses 54 and 55, they offer some guidance, right? They say, nevertheless, it is a reminder, so whoever wills shall remember it. So the Quran, the message of God, it's there for us, but it's up to each of us to actually heed the message.
So it all comes down to free will. We have the power to shape our destiny, but we also have the responsibility to use that power wisely. It's a bit daunting, when you think about it.
It is a big responsibility, but the surah doesn't leave us without hope. Even though it highlights those consequences of wrong choices, it ends on this note of mercy.
Oh, you're talking about verse 56, right? But they will not remember unless Allah wills. He is the source of righteousness and the source of forgiveness.
Precisely. Even in the face of human fallibility, God's mercy is always there. He's the one who guides us and forgives us when we stray.
That's actually really comforting. It's a reminder that even when we mess up, even when we make the wrong choices, we're not beyond redemption. There's always a path back.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a beautiful message of hope, a reminder that we're not alone on this journey.
So I don't know about you, but after diving deep into this surah, I'm feeling a little more introspective.
Yeah.
It's definitely given me a lot to think about in terms of my own choices and priorities.
It's a surah that stays with you, yeah. The imagery, the stories, the message, it all comes together to create this really powerful and unforgettable experience.
You've hit the nail on the head there. It's an experience, not just a text. It pushes us to look inward, examine our choices, and strive for a life that's in alignment with what's truly important.
Yeah, and it reminds us that even when we face our own weaknesses, there's always hope, always a way back to righteousness.
So if this life is a journey, as the surah seems to suggest, what are some signposts we should be looking for? What choices can we make today to ensure that we're on the right path?
That's a great question, and one that each individual needs to answer for themselves. But the Surah offers some valuable guidance. It starts with that idea of purifying our clothes, cleansing our hearts and minds from negativity and harmful actions.
Right. It's about making that conscious effort to cultivate inner purity and aligning our intentions with our actions, recognizing those moments when we're tempted to make the easy choice instead of the right choice.
Exactly, and it's about remembering our responsibility to others, those who are less fortunate. The Surah highlights the importance of feeding the destitute, showing compassion, recognizing our interconnectedness.
Right. It's a reminder that true righteousness goes beyond personal piety. It's about living a life that embodies compassion and justice, both for ourselves and for others.
You've summed it up perfectly. It's about striving to be the best versions of ourselves, both inwardly and outwardly. And it's about remembering that even when we falter, God's mercy is always there, guiding us back to the path of righteousness.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thanks for walking us through Surah Al-Muddathir and helping us unearth these hidden gems. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. It's always rewarding to kind of delve into the Quran and explore its timeless wisdom.
Well, I think it's safe to say we've been challenged, inspired, and maybe even a little transformed by this deep dive into Surah Al-Muddathir.
I couldn't agree more. It's a surah that leaves a lasting impact. It encourages us to keep seeking knowledge, keep striving for a more meaningful life.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to continue exploring Surah Al-Muddathir on your own. Read it, reflect on it, and just see how its message speaks to you. And join us next time for another deep dive, when we'll be exploring. Well, let's just say we'll be venturing into a whole new realm of knowledge. Until then, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.